Hello, this is Yarrow, and welcome to today's episode of the Yarrow podcast. It's Monday, the start of a new week. I hope you're having a solid start. I just did a call with a potential solution for getting video creative done, which I have a need for a couple of my projects. And it led me to a topic for today's podcast, which is all about working with contractors, how to basically solve problems for your company, get people in to do things, and what's the best way to go about that. Having run companies now for over 20 years that have predominantly been contractor driven. So I know this is going to sound absolutely crazy, but I've never had a full-time employee work for any of my businesses. Now that's partially because of the business model, just partially a personal choice. It does mean that there's some, pitfalls. Obviously, you don't have that loyalty of a full-time employee or the sort of commitment to growing within your organization. I would say it's a bad choice for a lot of companies to never have employees, but with the ones I've had, it's made a lot of sense to work with contractors, outsourced agencies, consultants, and so on. However, it doesn't negate the most important thing, which is it is difficult to find good people, and then when you have them, to retain them. So as the world has become so connected with the internet, and this idea of remote work is, well and truly cemented in our culture, there's a sort of projected concept that it's really easy to find talent because there's so much of it available globally. But I can tell you from my experience, that isn't necessarily true. There is an abundance of supply, but it's still not like easy to find the good people or the people you need for a specific solution. And unfortunately, there's also been a bit of a push for, paying for really low cost labor to get something solved. So, outsourcing to much lower cost countries to get something that would have been, double or triple the price. And you get it for 50% off by going overseas. And that's true, but it doesn't always mean you get the quality you want. And also it tends to make it more difficult to find the good person. But if you're looking for something under a budget, you have to do that. Now, I want to make a couple of distinctions here because there's different ways to work with remote work. You've got going direct and hiring contractors. You've got going to agencies that obviously perform some kind of middle person function where they're actually recruiting for you. They're adding some kind of profit margin onto it, but you get the benefit of them doing the work. They're doing the hiring, they're doing the vetting, they're doing the training, and often they bring a level of project management and systems. So, you have to pay more, but you get something. And then, of course, you've got directly hiring someone on a more full-time basis, which I won't touch on. But the other two, agencies versus directly hiring contractors, we do a lot of both. And there's definitely pros and cons. So the one thing I will say as a golden rule across all formats of this kind of hiring, when you get someone who's doing a great job at a task, do not let them go. Try and adapt whatever they want to what you're doing with them, like however you're working. If they're not happy with something, and it could be something to do with a certain client, you should be leaning towards supporting your team member and not supporting the client. Generally speaking, that's not always the case, but if it's a great team member, that's more common. You want to try and retain and support your team member and be willing to let go potentially of a not great client. Obviously you have to be sure of the situation, but that would be the way we would lean. Certainly with my agency, it's better to retain talent. Same with using just a contractor. I know from experience how hard it is to find someone who's responding fast, getting the work done, has a creative ability, a certain skill set, and that's rare. So when you do find it, you should be willing to pay a bit more. You should be willing to keep increasing the pay over time. Ideally, give them more work. The more work you give to contractors, the more they will obviously stay with you because you provide them enough for what they want. So there's all kinds of ways to work with these contractors. Now, unfortunately, there's often a kind of a training ground you have to go through, or a testing ground where you hear about the sales pitch of an agency and it sounds great, but then you start working with them and you're realizing, it's not quite what I want. Same with the contractor. You go to Upwork or you go to Contra or you go to Fiverr and you start hiring, and people have all these great testimonials, but you start to realize it's just not quite hitting the right spot. And that's not necessarily a talent issue or a skill set issue. It's just a misalignment of what you're looking for versus what this person can do. And that's the subtle part of this. And I think it's the harder part, is trying to find the alignment, especially when you're looking for a creative task. For example, I'm looking for video editors right now. I have an eye for certain types of content. I can see what something looks good and when something doesn't look good, but I shouldn't be the one who's telling the person how to do that. I should be able to see it and go, oh, that's good. I know I like that. But I don't want to be trying to teach someone to create that. The creator should be the creative. They should be the one creating the creative that is creative. So, it's up to them to bring to you what you see as good. Now, if you don't have an eye for it, that's even more difficult, because then you're kind of just 100% relying on your creator and you may not get the best work. But if you do at least have a little bit of taste or know what you want, you still shouldn't be the person who's literally telling the video editor what to create. So that's what I look for, in particular with contractors. You want that skill set, that ability to be self-sufficient, the ability to bring something to you that you go, oh, wow, that's better than I thought. And the funny thing is, I have this experience now probably more with AI tools than anything else. Like when it comes to, say, web design, and I'm using Replit, and I give Replit this tiny set of instructions, like one paragraph, and it comes back with a complete layout that I go, wow, this is actually, I had a visual in my head of what I want to look at, and it looks even better than that and has more features than I even thought about. That's what you'd want in a contractor as well. So you give them an outline for a video. You don't necessarily have all the component pieces for it. You give them what you have, which might be, the voiceover, the script, maybe a bit of B-roll that you like, maybe some example videos, and they come back and show you something where they just brought together all the pieces, pulled in their own, creative input, and it's come out better. That's what you're looking for. And when you see that, you're like, ooh, I like what you've done here. Let's do more of that. Let's go deeper. And it doesn't have to be a super creative role either. If you're just looking for a person who's got attention to detail for an important function. So maybe, for example, you're doing some core setup work with your sales funnels. You've got a CRM, you've got email autoresponders, you've got checkout, payment processing. There's a lot of technical steps there that have to work, and you have to rely on the contractor to know that they're tagging things correctly, their sequencing is correct, they've tested the checkout process, making sure people move from maybe your free newsletter to your paid customer email sequence. All these things where things have to go right. They're not necessarily complicated in the sense that it's not like figuring out something creative. It's just a sequence that has to be right. But there are technical aspects that do require a technical skill set to make sure it works. And again, you don't want to be the one asking them every single time, did you test the checkouts? Did you make sure they move from this email sequence to the next? Is the tags being applied correctly? You want to know that they already know how to do that and think that way. And that's what you're looking for, that attention to detail, that familiarity with the process, so that you can do the most important thing. And here's the key from a standpoint of being a business owner, a founder, when it comes to delegating and outsourcing. You want to feel that when you do pass something on to an agency or a contractor, yes, you're going to give them some core components, some instructions, but you can delegate feeling like it's their responsibility and not worrying whether they're going to make a mistake. Okay, I think that's a great topic for today. Hiring is obviously a huge subject, something that would take entire courses, I think, to properly understand. And even then, you have to really experience it. The most important thing you can do is get out there and start building a team. Obviously, I'm a little biased with that. I've got a company that provides executive assistance. If you want to check that out, it's 50hrs.com. Or in particular, if you want help with your email, we have a specialized service for that at inboxdone.com. And I've had assistance for 20 years now. I've had someone in my inbox since my very first company way back in the early 2000s. It's such an important thing to delegate. But all my companies have had some people doing technical services. We've been doing, engineering. We've been customer service, onboarding, admin, calendar management, email management. There's always people doing things that just give me the space and time to do other things, the things that I enjoy and the things that grow my company. In my case, as a chief of marketing or as just a content creator, I need the time to focus on being creative, even just recording an audio like this. I need to have the space, and my days is pretty open because I have a team doing so many of these tasks that are more specialized and certainly should not be things that I'm doing. And that always should be your goal as well. It's always the best path forward because it makes your business have higher value, higher enterprise value, which means it will sell for more, and it gives you more time and less stress and your business that runs without you, so you can travel and take time off without worrying about things falling apart or your income disappearing. Okay, that's it for me. My name is Yarrow. You can find me as a coach at insidegrowth.com, or you can check out my agency for executive assistance, 50 hours, 50hrs.com, where we can get you back at least 50 hours per month of time. Okay, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.